we can just go around and introduce ourselves verbally, if that's okay with everyone. And we'll have a chance to kind of get to know each other a little bit more. We do have a little bit of cushion time for a little bit of an icebreaker. So while Stephanie catches up with those folks. So I'll just reintroduce myself. I know this is probably, I know a lot of you well, but there are folks on my team that don't always get a chance to be a part of these meetings in the way that they're going to be a part of them today. And so I want to have a chance for you to meet them as well. I'm Jessica Olson. I am the Director of Community Strategies and Resources, which essentially just means anything AB 617 related at the district comes through my team. Everyone at the district is in some way involved in 617, and you'll learn that throughout kind of all the different types of things we do with this program, but it all sort of funnels through my team. So I can definitely be a point person for you. And on my team I'll introduce her, is Stephanie Ng. Right now I just have one actual staff member, although like I said, you'll hear from a lot of different people at the district. Stephanie is an air quality specialist on the team. And she is the person you will primarily get most of your emails from. So she's also a great person to respond to if you have questions. And then I'll go to Brad Dawson. You can introduce yourself. He is here with us from the district as well.
Hi, yes, I'm a supervisor in the air quality. I'm an air quality instrument specialist, and we've been deploying a lot of these community-based air monitors throughout the valley. Our first communities were the Fresno and Shafter communities, and now we're moving forward and starting to deploy some things in Stockton right now. So.
Yes, so anything monitoring related, there are going to be a couple of other folks you'll hear from, meeting after meeting. We do kind of spread the love amongst us, is certainly among the monitoring team as well. But Brad is kind of like the guy to go to. He is the one where all of his staff are the ones touching and working on those monitors. So Jazzy and Spencer, I think maybe has already met Brad or will continue to meet Brad through maybe some algal bloom work. So there's definitely a lot of connections, and Brad is your go-to guy. Maybe I'll go to kind of our agency folks so we can spend more time on kind of the committee members. So maybe I'll go to Scott, and then we'll go to our OEHA colleagues.
Yeah, good afternoon. I think most folks here know who I am, but my name is Scott Wall, and I am representing the California Air Resources Board, which is the statewide agency with kind of oversight and statewide strategies associated with this entire community air protection program. And I'll probably tell you more than you ever want to know here in a few minutes. But it's nice to see you all here.
And then we'll go to Lily and then Susan.
Hi, everyone. I am a toxicologist with the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments known as OEHA, and we support CARB's statewide implementation of AB 617, given any community health concerns and related matters to that.
And I'm Susan Hurley. I'm an epidemiologist, also working at OEHA with Lily. My section is focused on using biomonitoring to both complement the community air monitoring that's being done in a lot of the AB 617 communities. We're also using it where possible to help evaluate the effectiveness of some of the strategies. So recently we conducted a study in Stockton at a school to evaluate the effectiveness of air filtration, which I'm sure we presented on about a month ago. I think most of you probably missed it because you weren't on board yet, but you'll be hearing about it in the future. So, and I just want to say, I also can't stay on for the whole meeting. I just kind of wanted to meet people and hear a little bit about what you all are learning, but so excuse me when I sign off early. So nice to meet you.
Thanks, Susan. And then I'll go to Margot, and then we'll go to our 3 new members so far that are on with us.
Hi, I'm Margot Prowse. I'm a resident in the AB 617 boundaries. I've been on the committee since before it started, kind of, sort of. In fact, I knew Scott, what was it, a year or 2 before we received the grant, that he had swung by when we had applied for the grant at the first time. I'm a retired nurse, and because I'm retired, I have time to be on these meetings. That's why I tend to go to a lot of the subcommittee meetings, and this meeting was really important to me because I'm just really pleased to have the new people come on board to the committee. So welcome.
Thanks, Margot. And a lot of you, all of you were at the last meeting. So Margot was our gracious co-host and did such a great job. And I think put a lot of, I think put on display what you could do if you would like to be a co-host, although of course, no pressure, as Margot mentioned. So we'll go visually in my order. We'll maybe go to Spencer, then Jazzy, then to Minnie. And if you could share, Spencer, a little bit, who you are, maybe a little bit in your case about Restore the Delta and just kind of a little bit of background.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Spencer Fern. I'm working with Restore the Delta as their science coordinators, and a little bit about me personally. I was born and raised in Stockton, born in St. Joe's, but was born and raised here, went to college in Monterey, and then for a little bit of time in New York, and then came back to live in Stockton after I graduated. In terms of what Restore the Delta is about, we kind of focus on like the water quality issues in California and Stockton specifically. And the reason why that kind of ties into the air monitoring is because some of the work we're doing is related to harmful algal blooms. And the harmful algal blooms, when they bloom, can get aerial components to it because of the mist that gets spun up, or whether in recreational areas and stuff like that. So it's not just a water issue, it's also an air issue. And admittedly, it's an issue altogether, regardless of whether it's water or air related. So just yeah, that's just a little bit about how we're working on things here. But it's a pleasure to meet everybody and at least get the groundwork worked for this stuff. So thanks.
Thank you.
Am I missing anything?
No, I think so far so good. We have one little prompting question. I'm going to share. So we'll go to Jazzy and then Minnie. We'll have one more kind of round of sharing, and then we'll have opportunities throughout all of our presentations to share a little bit more, so provide some feedback. So that was great. Thanks, Spencer. Jazzy.
Everybody, it's nice to meet and re-meet you all. I'm Jazz Marie Latour. You can call me Jazzy. And like Spencer, I've been born and raised here. I was born in Dameron though, and they don't deliver babies anymore. But yeah, so I've been in Stockton my whole life. I've lived all over, but currently I live back in Southside Stockton. Part of my childhood grew up off 8th Street, over by Marshall. Went to middle school at Hamilton, B Street, and and then I went to UOP for my undergrad, and I moved back over to the South Side, and I learned about this, and I guess just all at once, learned about the air quality, and it was just really jarring, the information, and I guess just how conditioned a lot of folks from Stockton are to not ask questions, and I never even thought to ask questions or think twice about the air quality here. So I'm really excited to learn more and see how I can be a part of the solution.
We're so excited to have you. Thank you so much, Jazzy.
Yeah.
Minnie, I'm not sure if you are off your call right now, so I'll give you a moment if you can unmute and share a little bit and introduce yourself. And then while maybe that's happening, Stephanie, do you have an update on the other folks?
Yeah, I think we have Dr. Farrell potentially joining us. He's actually in a meeting right now, but potentially joining us a little bit later today, maybe 4:30.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I wasn't able to get a hold of Everett, but let me try John again one more time also.
All right, sounds good. What I'm going to do then is, Minnie, if at any point you're off your call, if you can hear us, definitely just chime right in. We can leave today casual. We definitely want this to be a get to know you. You ask a lot of questions. We have slides, all three kind of groups have slides to present, but I know all three of us are really just committed to getting you all just information we feel you need. We also are cognizant, and we talked a lot on our end of, we don't want to overwhelm everyone. So this is not if you came and you were either you're scared or you're expecting and want a ton of data thrown at you. That is not the intention today. We definitely wanted to introduce concepts, leave the door open for questions, and either come back with more information. We can maybe have another meeting with this group if needed. But definitely we wanted to just give you as much as you we thought we maybe needed to give you to be successful in upcoming meetings, knowing this is a learning process. It's not, here's 2 hours to catch up on 2 years worth of work. So definitely that's the intention. I'm going to share my screen briefly, share a little bit of like our quick agenda. We have a quick little video and then just another opportunity just to kind of share a little bit before we kick off. And I'm just gonna, before I forget, share my, I'm not even gonna know how to do this. In a second, I think I can share my sound. There we go, I'm gonna share sound. So eventually I will show a video. But just briefly, this is our intention today. So within the next about 10 minutes, we're gonna have a little video, a little bit. Our icebreaker is gonna be really much more of just a conversation with the kind of the new folks that we have on board, but I'm definitely open to conversations also with you, Margot, or others that are on board for the other agencies. I definitely like a lot of reflection if we can. We will have Scott, and this is just a tentative, we can be flexible with this timing too, but we will have Scott from the California Air Resources Board just kind of give an overview of AB 617, the roles and responsibilities of the different agencies. And I know he has some questions and conversations he wants to have. OEHA, or Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, Lily will talk about air pollution health effects. Again, this is not a bunch, it will not be a data dump. So if you have specific questions, we're happy to answer those as well, but it'll definitely be just high level, and we can certainly go into more detail as needed. And then we're going to wrap up. So those of that are able to join us at the end, the kind of the key of like, where have we come and what are we doing next in terms of committee work will happen at 5:15. So hopefully if Bobby is able to join us, if John is able to come back on, if Dr. Farrell is able to make it, that will hopefully help them kind of come in really at the right time in terms of, okay, what do I need to know for like next meeting, next steps? And then we also just left some space at the end if there's just resource sharing among Margot, who is a current community member, anyone else on here, we just left some space for that at the end of the meeting. I'm sharing this just briefly. You know this because you applied and looked at the boundary, probably to see if you qualified to apply to the committee, but just putting in perspective, it's always nice to take a look at the area that we're talking about. Everything we talk about in 617 relates to this boundary. But we know you will learn that air pollution, or as you can imagine, doesn't really know boundaries, if that makes sense. Like air pollution doesn't start or stop at those lines. So there are certainly ways that air from outside of this boundary can influence this community, and vice versa. This community can influence air outside this area. But really for the purpose of targeting residents who we want included in this discussion, or folks that are even grants where opportunities to apply for funding to help reduce pollution, we have to put a line somewhere and target something, right? And so that's kind of the start of this boundary is, okay, what do we focus on to reduce the pollution and target all of our efforts? So all the monitoring we're going to talk about, all of the implementation work we're going to talk about is specific to this outline. And then this slide, it seems like a lot I bolded, but in reality, this is just to kind of reference, and I'm just going to quickly highlight a couple of terms you're going to hear today. You will not hear all of these terms today, so do not worry. We also sent this to you, or we also put this in the agenda, but we can link it to you right now. We have a glossary that's much more detailed than this. But I'll just high level let you know, when we say AB 617, that's referring to the Assembly Bill. So you will hear that all the time, but it's the program. When we say CAMP, that is the Community Air Monitoring Plan, and you will hear more about that a little bit later. CARB, you're hearing a lot, and that is where Scott lives. That's California Air Resources Board. CERP is the Community Emissions Reduction Program. Again, we'll have a slide on that later, so you do not have to memorize all this. CSC, that is what you are a part of now. That is the Community Steering Committee, and we often refer to it as the CSC. And then there's two pollutant types that we'll briefly touch on today, and that's PM 2.5, which is just small particulate matter, and we'll go into a little bit of detail later in a slide, and NOx, oxides of nitrogen. So I'm just highlighting that those are the terms we're going to intend to use today. You might hear a little bit more than this, but I'm confident that people will either define them, or you can certainly raise your hand and ask the question. So with that, I'm going to share a brief video and then unmute and see kind of how we can get this meeting started.
The Crosstown Freeway is basically a freeway that was built through the heart of many communities of color. And so literally you have homes right across the street from a freeway, which creates this community in which you're almost destined to have asthma or some type of respiratory disease.
Our biggest challenge is getting to the grocery store. We don't have a safe street to get there. And most of us don't have cars. Matthew Road does not have any lighting. It does not have any stop signs. It does not have any sidewalks. It does not have any shade.
And so now we're coming back to our neighborhood to try and help and say, okay, we learned a little bit more. We came better. So this is what we need.
Stockton, unfortunately, is at a disadvantage geographically, being put in an area where it's mostly for goods movement. AB 617, I believe, is going to really showcase the data. We'll start to be more understanding, and the city and planners will start to then realize we need to be more careful and sustainable.
So I share that with you just for brief background. That is a very condensed version of a long community tour. Now watching more of YouTube. Virtually with folks, and really we felt like, and I know it was very short, this was only 1 minute, but it was sort of people's expectations, right, of like what they felt they were going to get out of 617. So I would just like a moment, if Spencer, Jazzy, Minnie, if you're there right now, if you could share just briefly what you want to get out of this, or what your intentions are for being a part of this committee, and what you kind of see. Maybe you need to learn more before you know what to get out of it, but just kind of share. It's definitely free for all in terms of your expectations.
I could start off if that's okay. Personally, I mean, I feel like I need to learn a little bit more in terms of like what the air quality is, and more of the idea, because I've been working with Matt from Little Manila here and there, and trying to understand the different types of air quality measurements and stuff they're going for. But admittedly, it's like it's nice to be able to meet with a bunch of people who are qualified to understand what types of measures are being taken in Stockton. And I mean, obviously, I've got a vested interest here, both in the Delta and air quality. I had asthma growing up. Somehow that disappeared. I don't know if that's exactly the truth, but it's something that Jazzy mentioned it earlier, was that it's like you don't pay attention, you don't mention it, it's not brought up to you, it's not told to you, and then it's like you have to kind of dig yourself to be able to find this information yourself. So I just think it's a great learning experience, and hope to learn a bunch more as time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Spencer, about that definitely like wanting to learn more first. I don't know where like I can fit in besides being from this community and working with people from this community. And so just like spreading like awareness about it, because like I mentioned before, I didn't know anything about this. I had no idea like what was in my own backyard, I guess, just growing up, to like trusting and trusting just the intention of all these corporations that are here. So it's like, you know, as I get older, I'm like, wow, I can't believe, like, I question everything else, but I never questioned my own like city. And yeah, so I'd like to learn more for sure. But I think to start, I think just really making other people aware. Like, as I looked at that map, I was like, oh my God, there's like dozens of people like I could have invited to be on this committee.
Yeah. Well, those connections and awareness and outreach is a really big piece of what a lot of folks in the committee share that same sentiment. And there are a lot of folks, and I saw your cameras off, so I didn't know if you were there, Margot. I was going to offer, Margot, from your perspective, not to like put pressure on you now, but do you have any reflections on your time on the committee of things you either expected and are, you know, you see them moving forward, or some progress that you're hoping to get out of it now that you've been almost, I guess it's been 2 years, right, that we've started this? Oops, you're muted, Margot.
I was going to raise my hand, and then I opened up the video and I was like, okay. I wanted to say, I know there's many people that might that you can see would be on this committee. Just so you all know, these meetings are open to everybody. So if there's someone that has a deep concern and is willing to listen in, they can't be officially on the quote committee, but they can hear what's going on. They can look up the information. It's pretty powerful, thing to get. So think about it. See, now I've forgotten what you asked me.
I was just saying, if you had a reflection, since I asked Spencer and Jazzy to share what they expect to get out of it, I just kind of wanted to know, almost, you're not quite midway, but through your experience so far, do you have reflections on what you've gotten out of it so far and what you hope to continue?
Well, you know me, I expected we'd be further along actually at this point in time. But working with this large committee is a little bit of a challenge. We have to, everything has its pathway to deal with it. So, and I understand that. It's just that I want things better, and I want things better now. And that it's a little slower process, but it gets really exciting. So when Jessica mentioned at the meeting last week, what are the two initiatives that are out there, Jessica?
Fireplace and EV charging stations.
Yes, the grants are available for people to access, certain criteria and all this and that and the other thing. But that's kind of exciting when the air monitoring people are getting our air monitors up. I can't even tell you the frustration we went through with dealing with air monitor placement in this committee. We'd make a decision, but then it wasn't agreeable to the buildings where we thought, well, that would just be so appropriate. Why is this so hard? So it's pretty exciting to see things happening now. So I'm pretty pleased.
Thanks, Margot, for sharing. And Minnie, I don't know if you were able, and I know you were on a call. I just wanted to, we were asking folks just kind of what their expectation is to get out of this process. So I don't know if you're able to unmute and share that with us, or even if you wanted to put something in the chat, we'll definitely check in with you later. And it sounds like you were also on a call. All right, well, I want to respect everyone's time. I know people are balancing this. It's always, you'll notice we have a mixture, I think, of afternoon and evening meetings. We don't want to take up everyone's evening, and we have lots of subcommittee meetings. So there are oftentimes we recognize this. And so we have been recording and posting all of these meetings so that if folks like Minnie who are taking care of other business, or others that we've already talked about tonight that can't join us until a little bit later, we always try to make an opportunity for people to check in anytime. Oh, hey, Margot, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and I don't know if this has been gone over before, but the CSC, the Community Steering Committee, is pretty much the decision maker on how monies are going to be appropriated. I mean, CARB is the decision maker. Let me say, CARB, we put forth the plans, and CARB makes a final decision, and that's how it happens. But the residents and the Community Steering Committee are guide the process, and it's been a real interesting process. That's all.
I appreciate that reflection, Margot. That is so true. And you'll see that theme tonight. We have a lot of questions for you all. It will be as you learn more. So certainly if that is your answer, that is okay. But we're going to ask you a little bit tonight of like what some of your concerns are. We're going to ask you a little bit of like what it sounds like you've already answered, maybe even some of the questions that I know Brad has for you of like, what have you learned so far about air monitoring? But we're going to dig into that. So I will pass it over to Scott. I'm going to step out for a moment. I actually have a childcare situation, but that means you might also see my child here in a minute. So I'll let Scott take it over. Stephanie is going to help run the meeting, but I will be back. And so with that, Scott, go ahead and take it away.
Well, hi, good afternoon, everybody. As I said earlier, my name is Scott Wall. I'm representing the California Air Resources Board. We basically are the agency that was given statewide responsibility for implementing the Assembly Bill 617. And then down at the local level, the local air district, so Jessica and Stephanie both represent the air district. they are responsible for kind of at the community level, convening the steering committee and kind of doing all the boots on the ground type of stuff, if you will. My role is, and I'm going to rely heavily on my slides, but I'll try to stop screen sharing as we can for some discussion points. But my role basically is to connect the steering committee and the district to all things within CARB. We are an agency with 1,800 plus employees with a huge variety of specialists and technical experts that all kind of have their own little things they bring to the various aspects of air quality control. And so my job is to, I guess, be there to answer questions when I can, and to then connect other parts of CARB in when it's outside of my jack of all trades, master of none perspective that I have as it relates to the Air Resources Board. So one thing I do well is get answers actually to things that I don't know, and connect you with other folks within CARB. And I'm, for some reason, with the screen share. Oh, there we go. So just a few things that I think that we should, I guess, hit on, just to introduce a higher level understanding. One is going to be like, who are the agencies that are involved in air quality? And then we'll spend a few minutes talking about kind of what led up to AB 617 and the creation of the Community Air Protection Program. And then we'll also introduce you very high level to the Community Air Protection Program Blueprint, which is the California Air Resources Board guidance document that kind of sets out a lot of the statewide strategies and all of the details that communities selected under this program would need to know to create a community air monitoring plan and a community emissions reduction program. I won't spend too much time on that piece, obviously, like I would with a new steering committee, because those are already in place. And so what you all are going to be bringing to the table is the perspective of how to get those things implemented and the specifics on how to best to do that in the community of Stockton. And then I'll basically wrap up just by sharing a few resources that we have available online, that if you'd like to learn more beyond what I was able to share with you here in our short time together this afternoon. So let's just talk real briefly about air quality agencies. And I'm not sharing this with you, I guess, to like think that you're expected to remember that US EPA does this, Air Resources Board does that. It's just, I think it's really, the moral of the story, I guess, for this slide is twofold for me. One is just to help you kind of like raise awareness that responsibility for air quality doesn't fall just on one particular agency, which makes things a little bit kind of dicey and muddy when we're trying to like fix things, right? And it also doesn't fit neatly into one little box. So really the three kind of primary air quality agencies listed on this slide here. On the federal level, it's the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and they basically are responsible for setting the national air quality standards that apply to everybody across the US. They also actually regulate kind of the interstate transportation, or those items that easily travel from state to state and across the states, things like the trains and the ships and the planes. And then at the state level, the agency that I work for, the California Air Resources Board, we basically regulate mobile sources. So the things that have wheels that drive kind of around in the state, so cars, trucks of all sizes, buses. And then we also actually do set standards for fuel types that are sold in the state, how clean they are, things of that nature. And then also we do regulation of consumer products, which is maybe something that's not so well known about us. So things like aerosols normally that kind of will put stuff up in the air and may have harmful effects on the environment, like hairspray, like cleaning products, and like spray paint. And then down at the local level, there are 35 regional air districts within the state of California, 35, one of which, and one of the larger ones, is the San Joaquin Valley, Air Pollution Control District, or just we call them Valley Air, the folks you see here. And again, what they do is really, they're more focused on regulating the stationary sources, the things that don't move, like factories, refineries. They worry about things like residential wood burning and how that affects the air, and wind blowing dust kind of that affects a regional area. So they're really focused more locally, but still a little bit regional. So again, kind of what makes this difficult in this program is that, you know, the Air Resources Board doesn't really have a lot of direct regulatory authority over trains. So you can imagine that if we can't get the folks at the federal level to kind of bring the emissions for trains down to the level that we want them to, that you can see that that's a little bit of a challenge on how we all work together to achieve the air quality goals in the state. Basically, what I want to recognize is that it can be confusing, and I'm going to speak for both the Valley Air District and for CARB here. We're not expecting you to remember who does what. I think what's most important that I'd like you to take away from this is that if you have questions or you have ideas to share, don't worry about this slide. Don't worry about who does what. Share it with somebody, even if you don't know who. And the Valley Air District and the Air Resources Board are very much strong partners in this program, and we'll make sure that your questions are answered and that you get what you need. So that's kind of the moral of the story on this one, and also just a little bit of an intro on kind of how air quality is regulated within the state. So really, to get us start thinking about local air pollution challenges, so we talked a little bit like this, the nationwide, the state, and now kind of like regional. What AB 617 did is kind of bring it down even more to a hyper local focus. And so to get us start thinking about local air pollution challenges, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question. For those of you who live in Stockton and are on the CSC, would just encourage you, like, feel free to unmute, share your ideas verbally, place them in the chat, whatever you'd like to do. But would love to hear your thoughts on what do you think might be contributing to poor air quality in Stockton? What are the things that you come to your mind?
I feel like it's kind of cheating to say it, but the Crosstown Freeway for sure.
Yeah.
That's
not cheating at all. That's freeways are definitely a major source of pollution. So absolutely, great point. Yep, Crosstown Freeway. Anybody else have thoughts?
Calling attention to in the chat, Jazzy saying port, all of the railways.
Yep, excellent. Very good point, Jazzy. Yes, the port, absolutely, and all the railways. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on kind of what's creating the pollution in Stockton? I mean, there are certainly many, and I wouldn't expect that maybe just coming into this, if you haven't been exposed to air pollution before, that you'd have all of the answers. Yes, absolutely, wildfires, great point.
Major truck routes outside the freeway.
Yep, okay. So when trucks kind of get off the freeway and go through the neighborhood routing, that absolutely would be a source of pollution. Yeah. Yes, okay. So yeah, the steering committee went through a pretty kind of in the early days, went through a pretty extensive kind of like understanding of the things that that create the air pollution challenges. And yes, Jazzy, I see agriculture, absolutely. Everything from methane from dairies to maybe rogue pesticides, to windblown dust, to agricultural burning. I mean, there really are tons and tons of, I shouldn't say tons and tons, but there are a variety of sources that come from agriculture. So excellent points. Let me see if I can get back into my share screen here. On Amazon, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, all those trucks rolling around. Fortunately, you know, there's been some movement lately to clean up those trucks and some commitments from the governor in the future to help that be less of a problem going forward. But they definitely are challenges right now to the air pollution. So you all actually just kind of like answered the question for me for this next slide, which is really what is cumulative exposure to air pollution? And so all these examples you gave me are really, I think almost all of them are demonstrated on this picture here, if you will. But basically the different sources of pollution in the community that you just shared really do help to illustrate the concept of cumulative exposure, which is represented here. Cumulative exposure basically means that we need to take into account all of the different causes of air pollution that impact a community. And unfortunately, a lot of folks aren't aware of this or have just recently become aware of it, but really a long history of policy decisions from a variety of levels of government and financial institutions really created and worsened air pollution and other living conditions for disadvantaged low-income neighborhoods. And if you haven't, I'm just gonna, this is kind of off my speaking points, but one of the things that I think was a big aha for me was a video called Segregated by Design. And if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to just make a note of that. And it's very easy to get to. You can go to segregatedbydesign.com. And once you're at that page, there's just a click to open and play the video. It was very eye-opening for me. And I think really does help to paint the picture of how we got to where we are now, with certain communities really suffering disproportionate effects of cumulative exposure to air pollution. So, I mean, in many communities like Stockton, the pollution sources that are located next to neighborhoods, daycares, centers, retirement communities, and other places where people like kids and the elderly spend time. And these are groups that really can typically be particularly vulnerable to the health impacts from air pollution that my peer at the Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment, Lily, will be sharing with you here in a few minutes. So all this said, to kind of set the groundwork for, you know, why AB 617? Why was it needed? What got us here? And so I would like you to welcome to the conversation my good friend, Bill, first name Assembly, full name Assembly Bill 617. He will now be joining the conversation. And if you get tired of my corny dad jokes, first, I apologize. All of my children are furry children. And so you can, you know, just tell me to just get through the material, Scott, if you get tired of my corny jokes. But so here's my friend, Mr. Assembly Bill 617. Basically, this Assembly Bill was established to address the cumulative effects of air pollution at the local level, really primarily focused on the most disproportionately burdened communities in the state of California. So as I stated earlier, AB 617 gave the California Air Resources Board the statewide kind of responsibility for this plan. And then the California Air Resources Board created what's called the Community Air Protection Program to implement all of the aspects of the legislation. And so you will oftentimes hear AB 617 and Community Air Protection Program used kind of interchangeably. And so just when you hear the two different phrases, know that they really get to the same effect. One is just like the actual bill, and the other is the program that implements the bill. And really, this program at its highest level, I will just touch on these very briefly. The upper left-hand corner, there are statewide and regional strategies, easy for me to say, statewide and regional strategies, such as prioritizing new or updated regulations to reduce pollution from sources that really most heavily impact disadvantaged communities. Things like you pointed out earlier, rail yards, freeways, warehousing, ports, heavy-duty trucks. And this also includes looking at current regulations and permitting to make sure that equipment being used actually includes the latest technologies that control the amount of pollution being released, which is called kind of like the best available retrofit control technology is kind of what it's called, but basically just making sure that there's the best technology, most up to date to control the emissions. And then the lower left, data collection, access, and visualization. The Assembly Bill 617 basically required new reporting of toxic emissions and other pollutants from a larger segment of industrial sources that was not required before, and also public access to a statewide online real-time air quality monitoring site called AQView, which we are at the California Air Resources Board are still working on making fully functional. Data is there, but it's not really easily visualized, if you will. But also want to tip my hat to the district. They have done a phenomenal job of making air quality data accessible to their communities as they have brought new monitors on. And so that data is currently available to you for those sites that are active. And then finally, at the community level, there are the community emissions reduction programs, the community air monitoring plans. These are also actually kind of prescribed, if you will, in the legislation. And it is very much focused on these being community-led kind of aspects of the bill. And so with that, that's kind of like the overall community air protection program. It's more than just CERFs and camps. There's actually also several things that are required from the statewide and regional level, from the air districts and from the Air Resources Board, as well as multiple tools that is actually creating transparency for a lot of the data for the public. Won't be spending a lot of time on the air monitoring plans and the emission reduction programs, because I think that that's going to be part of what the district kind of gets into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty during their presentation. But I did want to, I'm assuming, since I saw this document and the link of the agenda, that everybody here has read the community air protection blueprint from front to back. Just kidding. Yeah, I haven't even really done that in one sitting. So I've only ever gone back to it when I needed to find out certain sections. But the Community Air Protection Blueprint is the document, it's the guidance document that the California Air Resources Board put out basically as guidance, provides a starting point for the community selection, which is the annual process of finding new communities that are that we bring on into the program, as well as all the statewide strategies. So what are all the different kind of efforts we're doing at the statewide to really focus in on these disadvantaged communities with hopefully new regulations or increased stringency of regulations. But it also kind of the thing that's, I guess, relevant to the community steering committees is that it establishes the criteria for the air monitoring plans and the emissions reduction programs. And just kind of as a heads up, I would encourage you, unless you really are just very interested in a government document and want to read it, we actually are going through an effort right now of doing a reset or a revamp, if you will, of our of the program. And along with that, you know, as with any new program, this is a brand new program, hadn't been tried anywhere else in the world. So we couldn't really anticipate everything that needed to be in this blueprint in the beginning, first issue of it. And so we're actually undertaking a process where we're starting, we're getting input from what we call our consultation group, which is a cross-stakeholder group for the AB 617. We're getting input from really a variety of points to help inform what are some things that we missed in the first version of the blueprint? What are some things that we need to be more clear about? What are some things that we maybe put out there that aren't helpful? And so this document will be going through a pretty severe overhaul here during the upcoming year to 2 years. So just wanted to let you know, don't go memorizing the document because it's going to change anyway. So next we're going to touch very high level on the community air monitoring plan and the community emission reduction program. And it's going to be time for a dance break again. So I'm going to take this thing off of share screen. I'm kind of scared of Zoom, so I'm like, look at me, like stopping share screen, starting share screen. Yeah.
You're doing it, Scott. You got it.
You know, living the dream. Can I tell you? It's just crazy. I kind of like dance with 2 left feet, so I was scared when stops here. Anyhow, hopefully you saw the question there. But the question that I was kind of proposing when we start thinking about kind of air monitoring and why it's important, I'm not going to touch too much on the Stockton air monitoring plan itself, but really to establish a foundation on what's important about air monitoring. What reasons do you think it might be important to monitor local air quality and to make the results publicly available? So just open conversation here. Any thoughts? Or chat?
I guess kind of it starts from like where we were conversation topic from earlier. It's just if it's publicly available and it's in a spot where it's easy to find, because things can be publicly available but still be hard to find. In a lot of the cases of the research I've been doing with Restore the Delta, it's publicly available, but it's several links down the page, and it feels like having that kind of stuff publicly available and easily accessible is important for sure.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah, there's so many times agencies go, well, it's out there, and then you're searching to try and find something that's out there, and half hour later, like, oh, it was buried here. That was interesting. Yeah, good point, Spencer. Jazzy, any thoughts from you on kind of, the question was, it's what reasons do you think it might be important to monitor local air quality? And then also kind of second layer is to make it publicly available. What are some thoughts on why it would be important? How could we use the data, I guess would be one question that I would ask.
Policy change for sure, right? Using the data for policy change, but if we're not even monitoring it, then we don't really even know, because my computer is running low. Sorry. I'll run and get a charger in a second. But yeah, I guess just knowing the data is great, so that way we can figure out how to, I don't know, find some kind of balance or something. I don't know. Is there a way to balance? I don't know. Besides, like, I heard about the grant stuff and things that we can do on a level, but like infrastructure and like bigger companies and stuff like that, like I feel like that there's so much emphasis on what community members can do, but community members don't get money or incentive to behave in a way that we're expected to behave, and companies get rewarded for further hurting communities. So just so putting all of those things into right perspective, I guess.
No, those are all excellent points, and do definitely all play into the overall program really, and monitoring more specifically for sure. Okay, so yes.
This is Margot.
Yeah, Margot.
Can I just say, I don't know if you've shown the new onboarding people any of the census maps that we had over time. I don't know if it was you or the Air District that brought them forward to us, but when we were looking at the various concepts of air pollution and the data and the monitoring, seeing where, you can actually plot where problems are. And it was just really shocking to sometimes see what was going on in our city. So maybe at some point we can bring them forward and share, but it was a whole list of, well, these are where the NOx emissions are worst, and this is where this is worst, and this is how this is happening. It was, and it shows the census tracks show you the disadvantaged community area, how is it hitting them hardest. So it was interesting.
Yeah, no, the great point, Margot. There are several kind of online tools available to go out and explore a little bit more into disadvantaged communities. And look, I know the district has done a great job within Stockton of actually putting together different maps of overlay that actually show the types of pollutants and what the industries are. And so I'm not sure that they have planned to go into that tonight, but I think that you're right. If we maybe have another meeting, or maybe just as a refresher for the entire CSC, maybe the district could kind of do another quick preview of that mapping tool. if there's time today, I'm sure they'd be happy to. Or if we run out of time, then I'm sure that they would be happy to commit to doing something, a quick little overview of that again in a future CSC meeting. So, oh, and Lily just put something in chat that also is a mapping of, I believe, disadvantaged communities. So thank you for that, Lily.
And Margot, I'm just checking in actually. Can I clarify, was it the map that has the little squares that are like some are deeper color, some are, okay, awesome. I'll pop that into the chat, and like Margot is saying and Scott is saying, feel free to take a look at it if you have the chance.
There was like 7 or 8 of them, Stephanie, of the different pollutants and such.
Okay. So and kind of y'all had great kind of input as to why it's important. It's important that it be easy to find, publicly accessible, can drive policy change. Absolutely, kind of maybe get a little bit more informed as to what's going on that would then end up hopefully resulting in policy change. And just knowing the data. So really a couple of other reasons why air monitoring data is important to track and report is also, in addition to the great kind of things that you've already captured that are on this slide, something else that's pretty important about kind of real-time personal data is also that it allows people to inform their personal choices. Do I want to go out and do a jog this morning for an hour based upon the air quality, or should I maybe just stay in my house and jump on the 1970s style mini trampoline that my mom used to have when I was growing up? You know, I mean, like you have choices to make, and if you know that the air quality is really, really bad, then you can make personal choices or make choices for your family to help kind of minimize the exposure to that air pollution by making different choices. And you already hit on the source impacts. Absolutely helps you figure out like what's really causing the pollution, and also kind of policy change that Jazzy brought up, the whole support enforcement activities, the new rules and new regulations. With that monitoring data, we're able to get a more kind of comprehensive understanding of what's going on at the community level. And then finally, I went a little bit backward here, but it also, you know, we're hoping and we expect that as these community emissions reduction programs get implemented, that this air monitoring data will also help us to track progress of those programs. And as this kind of downward green arrow shows on the graphic, that we will see the trend line going down, recognizing and acknowledging the fact that there are many things that we don't have control over, like wildfires. It was also mentioned a few minutes ago as well, right? That's something that we kind of, no matter how much we do to reduce traffic or port or this or that, the wildfires are something that are really kind of outside of our control. And as it relates to the community emissions reduction program, again, the district will kind of introduce this to you. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these, but just really wanted to kind of point out that there really are a variety of types of strategies that a steering committee can consider while creating all of the measures that they choose to adopt within their emission reduction program. These really that I've got on the slide here are examples. There's the rules, which is kind of obviously passing laws that would kind of make things cleaner or outlaw certain types of pollutants. There's a facility specific risk reduction. So if there's a really bad polluting factory in the neighborhood, it would be the ability to go in and actually take a look at that specific facility that's polluting and figure out ways to decrease the pollution. Permitting is a part of strategies. So kind of allowing businesses only to pollute so much and figuring out ways to kind of like embed that into their permits. Incentives, which has been a big part of the program to date, kind of basically using incentive dollars to help companies and individuals perhaps adopt earlier technologies than required through regulation, and also kind of providing enhanced incentives, if you will, for folks that maybe live in disadvantaged communities to help really expedite the cleaning up of those communities. And then there are enforcement strategies. And then finally, land use, transportation, and mitigation strategies that really typically most of those land use, transportation, and mitigation strategies fall under control of the city, the county, public health agencies, and other governmental authorities, which is the reason why you're going to see actually the district and I'll say the steering committee have done a great job of bringing a lot of those decision makers to the table, and they're part of the CSC in Stockton, which I think is a fantastic thing. And so basically the Stockton CSC has kind of looked at all these different types of measures and the specific air quality challenges in Stockton, and they have obviously created and got approved from the district and from CARB an emission reduction program. And with your help as the new members, the committee is now dedicated to bringing this program to life. And I can tell you they are all working very kind of furiously and fast and hard to get this thing off the ground. So I'll wrap up my time with you by sharing just a few resources on the next few slides in case I just didn't give you enough technical information today. Just kidding. Basically, the few things that we have to offer with the Community Air Protection Program. We have an online resource center. Basically, this is a one-stop shop to obtain data, guidance, and tools to support improving air quality at the local level. And the resource center serves as a centralized repository of information and resources for use by community members, air districts, and the public. And I don't think that we probably got the PDF of the slides out to you all. So I'll see so that you can actually just go in and click the links for these if you are just dying to go out and check out what's out there. You'd have the links easily at your disposal. The other thing I want to let you know is that we've created some online training and other kind of help features. The training is not as riveting as I am. I'm just kidding. It's basically like slides and speaking notes, and but it does give you a nice overview of the entire program. There's 8 different modules in the training. Each one of them is about 5 to 9 minutes each. It kind of digs a little bit deeper into what's the Community Air Protection Program, what are the types of things a CERP should do, things of that nature. And all total, you can see all 8 modules in less than an hour. So that one evening where you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, can't get back to sleep, I'm going to just encourage you to hop to a computer. You'll be back to sleep and maybe have to do the next 30 minutes the following night. I'm speaking disparagingly, but really they're actually they're quite good. They're quite good.
But certainly not as exciting as you, Scott.
And then the final thing I wanted to let you know is that we do have a community air listserv, which for those of you that I always hate listserv, but basically it's if you want to automatically get updates from us about goings on from the statewide level in the future about the Community Air Protection Program as we begin like working on revamping the blueprint or things of that nature, you can easily go to our site and click on subscribe. You plug in your email address and we will fill up your inbox from now to all eternity. And you will be in the know of everything there is to know about the Community Air Protection Program. And with that, there's this final slide has my contact information. As I said before, if you have questions, comments, concerns, just know that we are all here as a resource for you. Go to whoever you're comfortable with, whoever's easiest, whoever you can find their number first, and we'll make sure the information ends up getting shared where it needs to go. So don't worry about understanding who does what. And with that, I guess I will ask what questions you have. Any questions for me before I kick it over to Lily?
But I will say that that this was helpful to just understand a lot more.
Oh, good, great, thank you. I'm hopefully the little context setting of understanding where did all this start, and who does what. But yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that, Jesse.
Just that little nugget of information was really helpful. Great.
Well, thank you so much. And if you haven't seen the video I kind of segregated by design, I would encourage you to go check it out. It's heart-wrenching, but also like really, I think it's important that everybody in this entire country knows about what happened. I know that the way that things are these days is not going to be that way, but I think it should be mandatory viewing for anybody who lives here in the US. But anyhow, with that, off of my rant, over to Lily, who will take us through some of the health effects of air pollution.
I appreciate all that knowledge. I continue even a year and a half into this work. I feel like drinking by a fire hose, and sometimes I'm just like, stop. But so I prepared a very short slide deck kind of by design, because I think that within each of the slides that I have, there's a lot of unpacking that could be done and could be discussed. So this slide deck is hopefully, I can't see what I'm doing, sorry. Am I sharing a PowerPoint title slide that says air pollution and health risk?
Yes, Lily.
Okay, perfect, because I don't see what I'm sharing. But anyway, I will proceed like I know what I'm doing. SlideShare is still relatively new to me as well, Scott. So this is all in good company. Aside from the title slide, here we go to the organizational structure by which OEHA fits into all of this CARB work and also Cal EPA in general. So in one of Jessica's beginning slides, one of the acronyms she had shared was Environmental Protection Agency. That not only applies at the federal level, there is also a California Environmental Protection Agency, and that is the umbrella by which our boards, departments, and offices, affectionately known as BDOs, all are housed under. So the 6 agencies under Cal EPA are the California Air Resources Board, as well as OEHA, but then there's also 4 others: Cal Recycle, Department of Pesticide Regulation, Department of Toxic Substances Control, and also the water boards. So collectively, these 6 agencies work to protect California's environment. And OEHA is kind of like the connector of all of these, because OEHA supports all of these other agencies by evaluating environmental hazards. So not only do we support the air program, we also support water and toxic substances, soil, land use kind of contaminants, as well as pesticide concerns given the agricultural state that we live in. So OEHA collaborates with CARB, specifically in AB 617, to identify, address, and make progress on community health concerns. So that means a lot of things to different people. So health as a overall arching concern in all of the communities that have been so far designated as AB 617 are predominantly things like, which chemical is worse for me? Is the pesticide or the traffic pollution worse for me? And I just want to rest assured to all of you guys, I don't know that we know, but we're working with you to try to figure this out collectively. And this is where AB 617 has the very, I think, fundamental ideas that we as environmental protection scientists and program implementers need in order to do a better job. So as Scott had shared that earlier slide showing the federal component, the state component, and then the local component, all of us, we're trying to make this puzzle, and we don't actually know what other pieces fit from other agencies, but that's our job to figure out. And then what we ask of your participation is to actually help us figure out what is the most pressing concern in your communities, given that you're the best, most knowledgeable people in the communities to help us be informed for these dashboards, data visualizations, and whatnot that Scott has briefly shared. So in being in your community meetings, I have learned that, you know, the Port of Stockton, the land use contributes a good source of pollution concerns in the community, as well as PM 2.5 being of concern in the community. And so OEHA's role in all of this, as I mentioned, is addressing and assessing the health benefits of emission reduction practices in the CERPs, in the community emission reduction plans. So we take the input on health risk from different chemical exposures. So that in and of itself is a lot, given that one of the slides Jessica had shown about the community boundaries, like we can draw lines on a map and like lines on the ground, but air, it will travel locally, regionally, like from far away. And wildfires are not discriminate, unfortunately. So like we're breathing things from things that aren't even in a local community, but that just travel because of meteorology and weather. And so with that, we got the port, which has ships, which, you know, Scott shared was like a federal jurisdiction with ships. We got the rail yard, which has trains, which again is under federal jurisdiction. And then we got like commerce, trucks and heavy duty diesel that comes from those trucks from you know, interstate commerce. And so all of those coupled together affect the community, and the built environment, which Scott was also mentioning, is you know, adding to this, like, how do we address these pollution issues if we don't know what's happening? And that's where collectively the CSC, the air districts, the state, we work together to try to make this make sense and do better. And then also OEHA has more recently started to think about our risk assessment practices on how we assess risk. Our traditional way of doing risk assessment has been kind of thrown on its side. Like, we realize we need to do better. Our traditional risk assessments are done one chemical at a time, and nobody lives one chemical at a time. So we're realizing that, you know, the traffic, the pesticides, the wildfire, all the things that happen throughout the state are actually things that we have to think about together. And so what OEHA does is, we're a small organization of about 150 staff. We're commonly known within the Cal EPA organization as like the ivory tower. We're the brainy scientists. We're like, tell me what you know, what you want to know about your chemical, and we'll write you a 100-page like boring document per Scott's comment about like many technical documents, hundreds of pages long. Nobody in the public really wants to read it, but hey, it's there. If you want to download it off the internet, like, go to sleep with it, and it's good. Our goal is not to do that here. Our goal is to make it actually implementable, understandable, and like help protect health. So one of the ideas is, with the advance of technology, such as like personal air monitors, you go outside, maybe like you have a GPS location on your air monitor. Maybe we can work towards technology improvements to make them calibrated to a way that we can actually use with regulatory monitors to do better. But all of that takes time to develop and work together. So we take those information from pollution sensor readings or monitor readings, and we use that as the input to assess health benefits from reducing pollution. The only way we can assess reduction in pollution is by the monitors, the sensors. And then with that, we have to digest that information and make an outcome with that. The outcome that we make with that is that we develop health guidance values for chemicals of concern. So in general, as a toxicologist, we say something is safe versus something is not safe. We try to get to a level that we can say, like it's low enough that most people, a sensitive population, for example, would not be affected by it. And so in our current way of assessing what a sensitive population would be is usually like the elderly or the young or pregnant women or those demographics. Unfortunately, what we learn as science progresses and as we just learn more about our built environment is that, as Scott had mentioned, the segregated by design is a very interesting, eye-opening kind of just, wow, society was built in a way that wasn't fair, but then also realizing that biologically as people, separating by old and young or physical conditions such as pregnancy or not is not necessarily maybe the way to categorize to be most protective of health. So OEHA is a scientific organization that is starting to think about these cumulative impacts. So as Scott has mentioned, cumulative exposures, we at OEHA are actually taking the cumulative exposures and adding the non-chemical, the built environment kind of layer to it and trying to think of what can we do with this, because we need to understand the totality by which people experience life. We don't experience it one chemical at a time, and we don't get to choose necessarily where we reside because of other structural factors in our lives, whether it be education, pay, just societal factors over time. So the health effects that we try to protect is based on using these health guidance values that we try to develop. And so going back to the idea of we can't eliminate all chemicals from our built environment, so we try to regulate to the extent that is considered safe versus non-safe. And OEHA in and of itself is not a regulatory management agency. We are a risk assessment agency. So in our support role, CARB, which has an enforcement division, or even the water boards, which has enforcement, or Department of Toxic Substances, we recommend to those agencies like, hey, this number is the number you should try to achieve as you enforce. And we recognize that it's, trying to say what is best might not be economically or technologically something that we can actually achieve, but we try to get as close to the value that is safe for the population. And then, so for example, OEHA has developed a health guidance value for diesel exhaust particulate. So some of those chemicals that we don't yet know are where we can, advance the science and help protect health more. And in that process of doing so, of learning about different chemicals, we also try to incorporate the lived experience of what health effects can we help prevent from perhaps the air pollution. So a common one is thinking about asthma. What we actually know as health scientists is that some of the things that might be one of the practices that might be implemented in a community, such as vegetative barriers, might not be something that as a initial thought, we're like, community might think, why would I plant a lot of trees versus if I can actually like replace lawn mowers or something? But what overall is the attempt here is to lower the exposure to the air pollution. So vegetative barriers do filter air pollution, and reducing emissions by changing equipment to more modern, cleaner equipment also does reduce emissions. And by reducing emissions, one reduces their exposure to the air pollution and thus protects their health. And then of note, OEHA does not have health guidance values for all chemicals. We are also still learning about our commerce and our agriculture and all of our different sources of pollution. So just some general considerations for assessing public health that we take. This is a very linear digestion of this kind of colorful schematic that I put on the left-hand side, kind of by design. I wanted to share the complexity, or even just a snapshot of some of the complexity that scientists, along with implementers of different programs in the government and the companies and all that, have for discussion. So as we talk about the top box of just emissions and discharges, that's the regulatory agencies talking with the businesses and the populations that have different sources of machinery or whatnot that might be polluting. And then what I meant by concentration is, what do we monitor? What do we know about how much is being discharged or emitted from said sources? So that's where monitoring comes in to tell us about concentration, which is the amount of something over a certain amount of time. And then as we understand what the amount is, we can begin to assess exposure. And that is a different understanding of concentration, because just because, for example, someone spills a gallon of water and you have a sponge, the closest I can come to this analogy is like, I don't know of a sponge that can absorb all the gallon of water. So the amount that you actually catch is actually the amount you are exposed to. So even though there's a huge amount of something being released, it's about like how much you can actually uptake. So in the case of the sponge, depending on the absorbency of your sponge, you'll only get some of it. Each person, depending on whether they're exercising or if they're just walking, their breathing rate changes. And so if it's a heavily polluted day and someone's running, they're likely to get more exposure to the air pollution than someone's just like walking regular slow, because their breathing rate is not as fast. So they're not taking as much into their bodies. And so that translates to the dose that someone gets. The dose is the actual internalized amount in someone's body that they get of something over the course of time that they're exposed to it. So it all feeds in together. And then all of that results in the actual demonstrated health effect, whether it be like asthma or some other chronic condition. And so that's the very fine, linear, clean path. If everything was perfect, we would be able to check a box and do all the things in a very clean path. But life, unfortunately, doesn't give us all our puzzle pieces all at the same time. And we can't manipulate or like address all of the points all at the same time. And so that's where that colorful schematic on the left is like, well, sometimes we have the orange piece. And so we do something there, and then we try to work on the gray piece and then do something there. And then eventually we want to get down to like, you know, the light blue piece, but sometimes we have to zigzag our way down to get there. And then that's my very high level overview of health effects. And I hope I was able to be understandable and accessible, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Or I can give a pop quiz. Just kidding.
I was going to say, hi, this is Jess. I'm in my car. Like I said, I am on a childcare pickup mission, but I just wanted to, and maybe you mentioned this, so sorry if so, but I just wanted to, maybe if you could touch a little bit, there are several folks on our committee that are constantly interested in talking about health effects and what is OEHA's role in sort of continuing to evaluate. You mentioned it a little bit. Can you kind of maybe retouch on the study you mentioned kind of when you gave your little intro within the boundary on kind of what's going on there?
So there is a exposure study. The Stockton air pollution exposure study is a small study that my colleague Susan is more familiar with, but just very high level overview is first trying to assess the amount of biological uptake, if you will, of the PM 2.5 in a specific site, which was an All States Academy school location. And so they enrolled, well, I mean, I'm sorry, Susan, if you want to, you can feel free to also, but very high level overview. There's a small exposure study done just in December, and the work is still being processed, and the outcome Susan can share.
Yeah, let's see. So very high level here would just be that, so we did this study at All Saints Academy, which is formerly St. George's that's probably how most of the Stockton folks know it. They just changed their name recently. But the idea was to collect some urine from kids who are in the school, and then measure the urine for chemicals that are indicative of chemicals that are in air pollutants, particularly particle-based pollutants, like a lot of what you get from automobile exhaust. But the idea was that we would collect this information. We put up, in addition to collecting the urine, we also added some additional air monitoring at the school, both inside and outside. And so now our plans are, we are going to be looking at the air monitoring data and comparing it to some of the stationary monitoring data that CARB, the Air Resources Board, or the Air, well, I guess it's CARB, right? Trying to remember who does what, collects to see if there might be exposures that we see in that neighborhood that maybe aren't getting captured by the stationary air monitoring. And then the other thing we are trying to evaluate using the biomonitoring data, which is measuring the chemicals in the urine, is to see if the air filtration that they've recently, that we actually installed as part of the study, if that is protective of kids' air pollution exposure. So we collect urine before they go to school and then after they go to school, and then we look to see if the levels are going down. So we actually just did this study. It's a very small study. It's really should be considered a pilot study. But we collected the data at the end of last year, and now it's all gone to the labs and is being analyzed. So we don't we don't have anything to say yet, but when we do have some findings, we certainly will be coming back to the CSC and sharing them with everybody.
Thanks, Susan and Lily.
I just like to make this, Margot. It was amazing that this, in my humble opinion, that this study pulled together it seemed to me as quickly as it did, and they got the approval of the parents and the school, and there was such cooperation. It was pretty impressive.
Well, it was impressive because of Noemi, who is the principal at the school, who is also a CSC member. She made it. I mean, she just made it happen. I'll spare you all the gory details, but we tried many other schools before going to her school because her school is very small. So the study ended up being a lot smaller than we had wanted it to be. But we feel like we're going to get some good information, some good, information to start with.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Do we have any last questions for Susan or Lily? Perfect. And I do see that we had someone else join us. Everett, is that you?
Yes.
Hi, Everett. Welcome. We're glad that you could join us.
Thank you. Having a few difficulties, but we made it.
Yay. We're glad to have you.
Phone died.
Oh, no. We did have Scott from CARB and then also Lily from OEHA present, but we have it recorded. So we'll be sure to post it and kind of share it with all the members who weren't able to make it. But you are joining us for kind of our last part of this presentation here, and it's going to be the Air District presenting. And I'm going to go ahead and just provide just some quick context. So you've heard from lots of people today about lots of things. I know it's a lot of information. We're going to try and keep it pretty short and sweet here because it is a lot to cover. But just to give you some context, we've heard from 2 state agencies, and now we're kind of going to move down to the local level. So the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District is kind of the local area agency, and we cover 8 counties from San Joaquin County all the way down to most of Kern County. And so Brad and I are really going to focus in today on kind of what's happening at kind of the nitty gritty of what's happening very specifically in Stockton regarding the camp and the SERP. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully no difficulties. Okay, let me know if you can see my PowerPoint.
I was going to say, Stephanie, I might have stolen all the good screen sharing vibes, but you got it. So good job.
Awesome, thank you. I love to hear it. And I'm going to go ahead and start us off to kind of provide some context with really where we started and kind of where we're going in terms of progress with AB 617 in Stockton. And so in December of 2019, Stockton was selected by CARB to be a community to participate in AB 617. In March 2020, we had our very first CSC meeting, and that month and year might sound very familiar to you because I think it's pretty monumental in many people's lives. That's kind of I think the year most people went remote due to COVID. And so this was our first and only in-person meeting before we switched virtually. But between March 2021, it was a lot that happened to March 2021. The CSC and Air District and CARB, along with many other stakeholders, worked to develop the SERP and the camp. And in March 2021, the district board, so our Air Districts board, adopted the SERP. After that, it went on to the state agency. So again, this is CARB. In July 2021, CARB's board approved our SERP. And kind of from July 2021 on to December 2025, our goal will be to kind of continue on with SERP and camp implementation. And really some other milestones we want to emphasize is really after the CARB board approved the SERP, really the CSC did some really great work in prioritizing measures from our SERP. And what I mean by that is kind of prioritizing the measures that the CSC really wanted to kind of hone in on, do work on, and maybe see more updates on. Whereas, there are many other measures that the district is working kind of behind the scenes on and will bring updates, but maybe not so regularly as the ones that are highly prioritized. And there was also a lot of great work to, as you might have noticed, because you may be getting lots of emails about it, there's a lot of great work to plan out these subcommittees. We right now have 10 subcommittees. Not all of them have started yet, but that the subcommittees is where we're kind of really digging into a lot of these work in specific measures. And I'll get into more information about what that actually looks like further in the presentation. And really what I am wanting to show about this is, while a lot has been done in these 2 years, as you can see, there is still a lot to do. Our target is 2025 to really complete our CERT measures. And so there still is, a lot that we hope that this, we're excited that these new members are joining us. Because there is, a lot to do, especially now that we're starting these subcommittees. We look forward to kind of having you new members jump into this process. And I won't go into this too much, but it's been mentioned quite a bit, but two really big components that the CSC has been working on for AB 617 is the Community Air Monitoring Plan, or we'll call it the CAMP, and then also the Community Emissions Reduction Program, or the CERP. And so I'll go ahead and pass it over to Brad, who will start us off with the CAMP.
Great, and I think I have the best acronym out of all the acronyms. We're all campers on my side of the, in my team, so Scott's not the only one that can do dad jokes. Mine are based off of acronyms of our air monitoring, which is even nerdier. Welcome, and I'm going to try to address some of the concerns and some of the thoughts that you guys have mentioned, as well as obviously progressing through this presentation. How many of you, of those, I think all 4 or 5 of you here, have gone onto our website or have gone and looked at the air information or how the air quality is using an app or the Valley Air District or anything? Crickets. Oh, perfect. We got one hand.
I was gonna ask if it counts the AQI on my iPhone. I don't know if that's Valley Air or that's something else or what.
That can be a lot of different things, and that's probably a rabbit hole I don't want to go down for you guys today, unfortunately. Our AQI is usually a combination of a bunch of different factors to try to give you a thumbs up or thumbs down for the day, but they aren't really telling you why or what. So one thing can be really out of control, while another pollutant would actually be really low, and that will affect the AQI. So it's really like kind of just a very basic scale of air pollution, but it really doesn't tell you what or why or how kind of thing. So cool, but that is something, because that is definitely out there. It's used a lot for news reports. Even some of the websites that we utilize, weather, especially I utilize Weather Underground a lot. It's out there as well. So it's just kind of like a little bit of different things that go into that AQI number. So let's go back to that. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. So in this process, when we started off, we met with the community and listened a lot to what the community members wanted for their community. And Margot mentioned, and I believe Stephanie shared some of the slides that we presented to the community members at that point, listing, hey, this is our modeling information for the data that we currently have in the Stockton area. Where are your concerns at? Where would you like us to put monitors at? What type of monitoring would you like to be done? And so on. So we kind of created our community monitoring plan based off of that and those initial conversations, where we, you can see the picture right here. This was a project that we all, everyone kind of put a pin on this virtual map. All this was through Zoom, as Stephanie was mentioning. So it was real hectic. And then it was like, it all came into one place with everyone's thoughts and ideas. From this, we really got out a lot of what your community's concerns were, which a lot of it was PM 2.5. That is the small particulate matter. We call it PM 2.5, it stands for particulate matter of 2.5 microns or smaller. And we really focus on that because that is how small the particle has to be to enter your lung and into your bloodstream. So that's where a lot of health, your health risk is established based off of that unit. PM10, usually you can get it trapped in your lungs and you can cough it back out. And smaller would just be as a pollutant, but that's why we capture PM 2.5. And so we can kind of get everything 2.5 and less. Everything else is actually scrubbed off with the unit and how it works. But PM 2.5, this can come from multiple different places, such as wood burning, wood smoke, diesel trucks, diesel particulates, industrial sources, etc. It is created through other pollutants as well. NOx can be helped to form in different climates. So other pollutants can actually interact with the atmosphere to create PM 2.5. PM 2.5 is not one thing. It's anything that is that size that's being captured. So I don't want to say it's only dust, it's only smoke, it's only this. It is everything. And none of these things you want in your lungs. So that's, a lot of concern was based off of PM 2.5. A lot of diesel particulate smoke, wood burning, all those things get lumped into that PM 2.5 capture. And I've already been talking about it, but diesel particulate matter, mostly from diesel trucks. It's actually soot. It's unburnt fuel that there was too much fuel in the combustion cycle and it's emitted as that black soot that you see outside there. That can be captured in a PM 2.5 instrument. And NOx, oxides of nitrogen. This includes NO, NO2, and the combination of NO2 plus NO is NOx. We go after NO2, that's what's really abundant in our atmosphere. If you've ever gone to get your car smogged, they're going to go after NO because in your vehicle, you won't have a lot of oxygen inside your exhaust pipe because the oxygen's outside. The oxygen would have already been used in that combustion cycle. So if you ever go to the smog station, you're looking at it, you're like, why aren't you looking at NO2? Brad Dawson over at the Air District told me how bad NO2 is for our air. That's the reason why. But it is mostly emitted from our from vehicles, fuel sources such as trains, trucks, and this can also nitric oxides can mix up in the atmosphere to create PM 2.5 as well as smog and that ozone. That especially when you see it in the summertime, that extra heat really catalyzes that chemical reaction with nitric oxides. Ammonia in the atmosphere, sunlight will create that smog, and we end up with ozone and extra PM 2.5, especially with that. We've all seen LA when we've gone over the grapevine, and if we start to peek at LA and you see that huge haze, or you see go up to our mountains, that smog level, yeah, that's all of that, and it gets real bad in the summertime. Next slide, I think. Thanks, Stephanie. Stephanie's controlling all the presentation for me today, so I'm blessed without having to try to not kill our presentation. So our big goal for our community air monitoring plan for the Stockton community is, one, obviously monitor in real time what the pollution is in the Stockton communities. I identified the sources of the community air pollutants and to continue to inform the CERT process of what we find with our readings. And also inform you guys, the community, about your air quality in a hyperlocal sense. Like, you know, this monitor may be a block or two away from you where you're at. So you can actually see in real time, hey, that monitor down the street, it's not looking too good for me right now. Maybe I should stay inside. And then track all these trends over time. All of the monitors that we are deploying for all of our communities are mobile. We want to make sure that we at least get one full year of trending in so that way we can fully get a whole annual idea of what the air pollution is in there. So we get the full from summer to summer, we get the full winter in there. So that way we're not just cherry picking, but we do have the capability of being there for a year or two and then moving the monitor somewhere else if there's a concern that arises. So we want to gather as much of this information, share it with you guys. And if there's a change that needs to happen, we can make that change. So we worked with the community. We've done our outreach. We've kind of plotted on the maps where, hey, if we were to put a monitor, where would you like it at? What would you like the highest end monitor to be placed at? And so we've worked on that, placing those out on those maps. And it kind of gets us into the status. Currently, 4 of our 8 sites are currently deployed. It's not true if you look at the website. That's unfortunately, I can place things out there, but we still have to do a lot of digging on our IT end and making sure that everything on my computer matches to the unit outside. And then we can make sure that it links to our website. So there's a lot of hoops and ladders that we have to go through on the back end to make sure that we publish this correctly. But the 4th site that I'm talking about, once it's online, it's already, our goal is to get it out there. We can always back pull and get that past data in, but we can't. So our main goal is to get it out ASAP. We'll work on the back end to get it up online, and we can always backfill that data in. And so what I want to do is try to take over a screen now. I just kind of want to walk you guys through our website and how you guys can get to the data. I think Spencer was mentioning earlier, it's just like, yeah, sometimes it's just buried. We try to not do that. And if there's any other suggestions, definitely, we're all ears. We're all still learning on this. This is my 3rd community. I'm working on another one, Arvin and Lamont. If there's any, we're continuously building and progressing our messaging, how our data is being displayed. And if there's something confusing, please let us know so that way we know that we may need to rephrase something a different way. But if you guys start from our Valley-Air website, valley-air.org, right over here in this column, right over here, we have a special squared all for air monitoring for the AB 617 communities. So right here, if you select there, it will take you to one of our community air monitoring pages. And beneath here, you can kind of see we have a couple of videos where you kind of see all of us working on the units. This was actually meant for kind of at the beginning. We need to update this this little video. It only says Shafter and Fresno in it, but this is me and my staff going out and actually deploying and going out to the communities when we only had 2. Now we have 4. But yeah, those are there for you to click on. But for Stockton, that's where it's important right now. If you click down to here, we will have an interactive pit map where you can actually see all the monitors on one map. Here, I'll show you Shafters right now, just so you can kind of see what will happen. So right now you can see this is the Shafter community. These are where the monitors are at. And if you click on each one, you could get more information from that site right there. So you can kind of have a map overview. But let's go to Stockton's page. We don't have that map yet available. But for everything on the community monitoring page, we have the 3 sites up and running right now. One is University Park, and that is actually a CARB monitor site. That's not something that I have deployed, but that is a regulatory permanent site. That's never going to go anywhere. The Little Manila Center was gracious enough to let us host an air monitor there, as we are still trying to deploy some extra monitors around in that area, as well as the Cal Water office. So you can click on one of these. The Cal Water office is a PM 2.5 monitor, where you can see in real time, this was today's PM 2.5 trend. And we also have all the data on the right-hand side of the column 2. So you can kind of see, you can't really tell like what these numbers are. You can highlight over them so you can get that number 2, but we give you the chart so you can actually see how it's going. We will be updating these on, I believe, on a monthly or quarterly basis with all of the data. So you can still go back and click, last month on the February 16th was actually when we deployed it. So you can actually see at 1 o'clock was the first hour that we got in, and we had data from that point forward. But we do grab all this data, put it into a big spreadsheet or PDF, and allow you to download that too. So you'll always have a historical downloadable ability to get all of the data for your sites. And one last update for this area. Let me go back to the community monitoring page right here. We have a status of our community monitoring implementation. This link right here will take you to a map of your community. And this will kind of give you guys an update of where we are at with deploying these monitors into your community. So you can see Zone A, the Hagen Museum, it has not been installed. We are waiting an electrician to install the outlet. This actually may happen tomorrow. A lot of these sites are happening very, very quickly. So as soon as I get people on board and they're ready to rock and roll, me and my staff, we are out there. We're deploying these monitors as soon as we can to get this data out to you guys. So there's a lot of things that are happening. We are working with the Edible Schoolyards and Bogs Track to deploy the trailer out in Section B. We're just in between a couple of contracts with electricians. Conway Homes and the Taft Community Center down here. We are working with the administration process with those 2 entities. There were some hurdles and some people that we were not talking to and some people that we were supposed to be talking to. So we're kind of like making sure that we get all of our lines, all of our crisscross lines unweaved, and so we can move forward with deploying 2 monitors there. The next site that we'll probably be deploying out also is our small, what we call it an air pointer, but it's a small compact multiple pollutant monitor. Last week, we just deployed one at a water tank site off of El Dorado and Jackson down there. So we just placed that one last week, and hopefully next week, I can get this another unit out to San Joaquin Fairgrounds. And then we also have already deployed the PM 2.5 monitor at the California Water Service. So we still have a couple of sites to develop, a couple of sites to go, but as soon as we get, the go ahead and the green light from these facilities, we have these monitors in our extra storage site ready to rock and roll. I've been talking a lot. My wife says I do that too much. Does anyone have any questions or concerns or anything about air monitoring that I can help answer? I'm going to stop this share.
It's kind of a question. Yeah, I think it's a question. It's about so like I'm nearest the Taft Community Center. But I live maybe like a mile or 2 away. So it's still like accurate for the, is that like to cap? And then there's one in the water area, which I think was still the same zone. So it's like you're depending on those 2 sites for that whole F area.
So currently we have, here, let me go back and I'll share you my map again, sorry. I shouldn't have got rid of it. So right here at this little pinpoint is kind of where the Taft Community Center was at. This area right here was area F. And so we kind of really broke out the community into multiple different areas when we we're kind of trying to figure out, hey, where can we place these monitors at? And so F was going to receive a PM 2.5 monitor. Currently, it's actually placed right above where the tip of the F is at, and that's the Little Manila Center. And that's where we have a PM 2.5 at right now. The community wanted the Taft Community Center because it was kind of really at the southern end of the community, and to try to capture anything that went through the community, it would hopefully be gathered into that monitor with prevailing winds. So that was our goal to get there. If you guys do not know the history, we actually had the green light to deploy all of our air monitors with incorporation with the Stockton Unified School District. Unfortunately, that folded, so we had to kind of take a couple of steps back, and still wanted to try to get these monitors as close to children. They're our most sensitive receptors. So again, that's why we tried the Taft Community Center. It's right next door to the elementary school there too. So we were still trying to go off of that initial template of monitoring placements. And then obviously, if you are in that area, I've looked really hard. There's not a lot of places to place a monitor. There's a lot of residential. There's some really heavy industry. We kind of don't want to put a monitor right in the middle of heavy industry because that's just not going to be characteristic of the community. It'd be a point monitor, it'd be a source monitor, not an ambient air monitor. So we want to kind of get away from a little bit of that, but still be able to capture it, because that's what we really will feel like. So I'm sorry, I hope I answered that, Jazzy.
Yeah, no, that was good. Thank you, Brad.
Any other questions or anything? I know
I think Everett tried to unmute.
I think we're going to be looking at HABs, hazardous algal blooms, and looking at some possibilities of how we can measure and monitor for any potential air pollutants or toxins that can come off of these HABs. So we've had initially worked with the Water District on some comparing different scientific journals and literature on the topic. I can tell you it's something brand new to us, and my staff is enthusiastic about joining that endeavor. So I have some people here that are really excited to start working on that.
And I did want to check in, Everett, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The park that the Universal Park is at the San Antonio State campus. Okay, and so the other one is this is where we used to have church at there. But the other question is, I live again on I live right behind Dentoni's Welding Shop, but on Worth Street and Airport Way, which would be about 6 or 7 blocks from the fairground, and then maybe about maybe 8 or 9 blocks from the water company, Cal Water. Would we get all the measurements from both or one of those in this area?
So pretty much right now, it's going to be kind of like a blur. When we put our reports together, we will combine a lot of the results to see if there's anything that's an outlier. Are we seeing a lot more emissions here than we are over here? Is it kind of all the same? So I think at that point, when we start being able to have all the sites up online and being able to compare it, it would be better to compare for your sake. Like, hey, these are the 2 sites that are closest to me. One's upwind, one's downwind. Is there a real big difference? Where am I at? And kind of getting that data. I'd say right now, initially, we're still trying to get all these monitors out and deployed. So it's a little early to know too much about it, but yeah, I think once we get a lot more of that information in there, we can really start understanding the impacts to the community, and especially like where you're at.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. And Scott, I'm sorry. I think I may have answered Everett's question inadvertently. Is University Park on the Stanislaus State campus? Do you know that location? I have yet to be there.
I don't know the exact location, but yeah, I believe it is Stanislaus campus, I believe.
Yeah, it's the campus, but and the monitor is just a little bit to the south end of that whole plot of land. I don't know how much is actually Stanislaus State, but that whole park area, you know, is to the south end.
I know on a Google Earth map where it's exactly at. I have yet to be there. Unfortunately, I haven't. They haven't asked me to come over and help them at the site yet. And with that, I think go back to the presentation. Oh, I think I've already talked about this slide at length, and I think the next slide is all you, Stephanie.
Yeah, so if we're
Passing the baton back.
Thank you so much, Brad. And yeah, do we have any last questions for Brad, air monitoring, the camp, before we move on to the SERP? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Feel free to interrupt or drop something in the chat. We're happy to go back to it. But if it's the case that we're good with air monitoring, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Community Emissions Reduction Program, or the SERP. And really the goal of this SERP is to, of course, in vein of this whole program, is to reduce air pollution and exposure to air pollution within the AB 617 boundary. But of course, we know our air doesn't sit within the boundary, but really focusing our resources and efforts in this specific area through many different ways, through partnerships with different stakeholders, different incentive programs, education and outreach throughout the community, and enforcement and regulations. And really the approach behind this is we worked with the CSC to inform the development of several different measures. And so this SERP, this document, if you look through it, it has some sections that kind of outline the community, discuss some specific issues that this area in Stockton faces, and it really outlines specific measures they're all clean air measures in the hopes of course, reducing air pollution and exposure to air pollution. And so these measures include $32 million in incentives for the that was included in the SERP. And we'll visit it in a second, but you can go on this website here for more information. And in terms of the status of the SERP, again, kind of going back to the timeline, the SERP was approved by CARB in July 2021. District staff and CSC members and also participants and of course our subcommittees are working to implement these measures. And we'll go ahead and take a look at this, but all of our SERP measures are tracked in a document. It's quite an intense document, but it does a really good job of really fine tuning on specific units that have kind of, depending on the measures, the funding that's been used to date, units that have been switched out to date, and kind of the latest updates. And so we'll visit the Stockton tracker as well. So I'm going to take a moment here. I'm going to do the same thing that Brad did. I'm going to go ahead and take us to our website, and I'm just going to go ahead and outline, I think, hopefully a good couple of places that you'll find lots of information regarding this program. And so go here. And so if you go to, this is our community.valleyair website, and this really outlines kind of everything going on with AB 617. Like has been mentioned by Scott, this is really a statewide program. So we have 4 communities throughout the Central Valley that are going through this program, or that were selected to go through this process of AB 617. And so if you click right here on Stockton, I'm going to take you through a couple of places here. So the first place we'll visit is our steering committee meetings. And this page really outlines, this is kind of your landing page for everything related, all the materials related to our CSC meetings. So again, those are our monthly CSC meetings that happen on Wednesdays, the first Wednesday of the month from 5 to 7. And as materials become available, we post them to this website. And so oftentimes you'll find the agenda, you'll find different presentations, or if there's any handouts for the meeting. And kind of following the meeting, you'll find the recording posted, the chat. So if you maybe were in the meeting and you were like, oh, someone, Scott said something that I wanted to remember in the chat, you can kind of view the transcript and kind of look through that. And then also our facilitators, Hardering Company, they will collect action items, so kind of to-dos that come out of our meetings, and we will post them exactly from the meeting as they kind of collect them. So you'll see these read off at the end of our meeting, and we'll post them just as is, and throughout the next month, we kind of work to complete them. And so this is one spot that I think is definitely a good place to visit if you're wanting to know kind of what's going to be happening at the CSC meeting. I also wanted to show our page for subcommittees. So like I mentioned, our subcommittees are very active. A while back, the CSC did work to kind of prioritize which measures that they wanted to really like hone in on and work specifically in subcommittees in. And you can see that kind of feedback here, but this is really the result of that. There are 10 subcommittees that some of them have been started, some of them are still kind of pending, and we'll kind of see in these next few months starting up. But for example, if you were interested in perhaps participating in, you're very interested in trees or vegetative barriers and you want to participate, you can see when the next meeting is. You can go into the page. And if you wanted to kind of catch up on, this is the subcommittee that I think has definitely done, has had the most meetings. And so you can kind of go back and watch the progress. And then here, some of our subcommittees do have agendas that are developed by the community. So you can click into here if you wanted to see kind of the notes taken from them. And then I'll also pop into specifically, like we've been talking very much a lot about these CERT measures. I'm going to pop into what is specifically meant by that. And so on these pages, you can view the CERT measures that are specifically related to this tree subcommittee. So if I pop into here, there's the document that kind of outlines some background about vegetative barriers. And if you go down here, here's the actual strategy that was developed to be implemented. And for example, VB1, there's like acronyms that kind of abbreviations that belong to all the measures. VB1 is an incentive program for the installation of vegetative barriers around or near sources of concern. And if you look down here, the budgeted amount, there's 1 million budgeted to help with the implementation of this measure. And so if you pop into here, you can definitely, I encourage you to take a look. I know, again, it's a lot of information, but I encourage you to take a look. And if there's any subcommittees that you are interested in, this is definitely the best place to kind of pop in and see when the next meeting is and see what the subcommittee has been up to. And then I think the last thing I'll kind of draw your attention to on our Stockton page is there is a Stockton tracker that you can look at that gets updated monthly that kind of shows the progress with all of our CERT measures. So this document, again, you can kind of see which measure it is, the contact, the district staff contact, a description of that measure, whether or not it requires a CARB approved project plan, the funding allocated to it, what's been used to date, the target emissions, and then kind of just a brief update of really what's happening, what's been the latest on these measures. So for example, that same measure I just talked about, installation of vegetative barriers, you can see kind of some recent updates are, there was a subcommittee meeting that happened on the 15th, and then and that was to review the draft project plan. And then the next subcommittee meeting will be March 15th, so next Tuesday. And you can go down, it's a lot, so I'm not going to go through it. I don't expect everyone to like kind of read it as I'm scrolling. But as you can see, all the measures are really laid out and you can kind of go in and see the progress of each measure. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about the website? Or if there's any resources that you've kind of, through this onboarding that you maybe are wondering where it might be? Cool. I will go ahead and keep going through the presentation then. And we're getting close here. I am being mindful of time. I know that we're coming close. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Okay. And in terms of now you've kind of, you're a new member to this process, what might be kind of the commitments that you're that might be added to your schedule, added to your lives. And so in terms of, I think you all know, because you've been to it now a couple of our meetings, our regular CSC meetings are the first Wednesday of every month from 5 to 7 p.m. These are for residents that enroll in the program, stipend eligible. And these are also live streamed on YouTube. We have agenda setting meetings, and these are 1 week, the Thursday following our CSC meetings. Those are 3 to 4 p.m. And what these meetings are for, it's to really debrief the past meeting and then we use this time to kind of prep for our next meeting. These are not stipend eligible, they're not live streamed, and they're kind of an optional meeting if you're available, if you want to help kind of have some input on the following meeting. This is definitely a good time and space for that. And then also, like we've been mentioning, our subcommittee meetings, there's not a set time for like each individual one. So our schedules will be posted on the website. These are not stipend eligible and they're not live streamed, but they're all recorded, and then we post them up to the website like you've seen. And the last thing I'll discuss is CSC member commitments. So we did want to kind of touch on the CSC charter. And this document was drafted and amended in coordination with CSC members. And what it really kind of describes is CSC objectives, including being responsible for advising the Air District in implementation, CSC and district roles and responsibilities, different meeting and voting procedures that we uphold in this group, and then the membership participation agreement. And this could include just working collectively and cooperatively with all the different stakeholders to ensure all groups are being heard, and then also just as a member actively engaging in all of our scheduled meetings. And we're just going to ask, we did send it out, but we're going to ask that you review, sign, and return. There's a page in there that you'll sign. It's attachment B, just at your earliest convenience. And this is going to be here for you. We've visited many of these pages and we've talked about all of these links, but we just wanted to kind of leave a space here. That way, if you wanted to go back, we'll send this out to the group. But afterwards, if you just were like, oh, I want to actually go back to that glossary of terms, they're all kind of, these resources are all listed for you. Does anyone have any questions about kind of the district side of things, how implementation is going in Stockton so far? All right, with that, I'll pass it over to Jess to close us off.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you, Lily and Scott, and to all of you. It looks like, my time having to go run some, we ended up getting at some point everyone that we needed, I think, to get on this, right? I think this is all of our new folks, so I just really appreciate all of your time. We don't want to take you longer. I know we went over 6 o'clock, but what we'll do is in a follow-up email, we'll also solicit feedback. We know we touched high level, we know there's much more to learn, but what are some resources or some extra materials that we can share with you that will help you? I will tell you though, and Margot was so generous in sharing some of her experiences, I think time is a resource that we can't give you, but definitely over time will help you become familiar. So we're here for you. We're so grateful for this opportunity to connect a little intimately with you. And with that, we'll go ahead and say good night and invite you. Thursday is the most upcoming meeting I think we have with the group, which is the agenda setting meeting. So we might see some of you there. Take care.
Time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice meeting you
Have a
all.
good evening.